Welcome to the C-Suite podcast with me, Russell Goldsmith. We are back at MPE Berlin for a second year. This is Europe's largest merchant payment conference, and we're recording this episode in partnership with Ecommpay, a global acquirer, payment gateway, and orchestrator that offers fully customizable payment solutions to its clients. I'm going to be interviewing a number of the speakers and attendees here on Ecommpay's booth, and I really hope you enjoy these conversations. So welcome back to the podcast to Daniel Kornitzer, Head of Global Partnerships at Ebanx. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us.
Russell, thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Now, you actually joined my colleague Graham Barrett on the podcast last June at Money 2020 Europe. One of the topics that you talked about was agentic commerce. That's perfect because that's the theme of the topic that we're kind of focusing on here on Ecommpay's booth today. I was therefore keen to kind of pick up on the conversation that you had there. That was 9 to 10 months ago. In general, where do you think merchants are now on kind of their agentic commerce journey? Are they kind of experimenting? Is it early roadmaps, or is it still that kind of wait and watch phase?
I think it varies by merchant, but okay. I would say that experimentation is probably the right phase. And also, I would say agentic commerce is not black or white. There are different levels. Whether you look at it from a merchant's vantage point or a consumer's vantage point, there are different levels or variations, all the way from at the simplest level, it's essentially checkout autofill. It's removing the need for web forms, helping consumers, have an accelerated purchase process, but it's a human placing the order at the end. Then you have the curating of information where you give your agent a script. I want to go to Portugal for a week. My budget is 500 euros. We have kids 5 and 8, and we love the beach and golf, and it comes back within the budget with options. Here's 3 hotels in Porto, and here's activities, but the human ends up picking. So it's a curating, gathering the info, saving a lot of time, and giving you the final choice. So as a human, you pick the final choice, and it's still human ordering. Then you have the idea of persistence in that the AI has a memory of the interaction. So let's say you bought something for your daughter that's 13. You can come back to the agent and say, hey, can you buy a hat for my daughter? You don't have to explain your daughter is 13. She likes pink or blue, or they already know. It's an extra feature of the AI. And then, so these first 3, I think, would be still human ordering. And then you have delegation, where you tell your agent, I want to buy Adidas, this model, size 42, blue, don't pay more than 90 quid, and it goes off and it does all the research like a mini RFP and places the order. So that's full AI ordering. And then you have the 5th level, which is anticipation, which means that you don't even give a script to your agent. I'm in Miami, there is an incoming hurricane, and the agent knows that to go out there and place orders for food, for water, for batteries, the stuff that I'm going to need in case the storm, turns out being a nasty one. So it's the agent acting in anticipation of being told what to do. It's like but I'm just trying to paint a picture of there's a full range of variations on the theme of agentic commerce.
I'm worried when that agent's going to turn around to me and say, I see you've put on a little bit of weight, Russ. I've ordered that jumper in a larger size for you. Is that where we're going to get to?
I think so. And there is no reason why the agent could not be looking at, let's call it signals, emails, texting and stuff, and anticipating your needs before you even realize that you need something. Like, there is a risk that they may say, well, why did you buy that? So I mean, everything, that's the beauty of it. Everything has pros and cons. I mean, we've talked about the beauty of the simplification, the value that it can add to both consumers and merchants, but there is risks as well, right? What if the agent that shows up, because in agentic commerce, there is no more UX per se, right? There is no human, and it's not a user, it's an agent dealing directly with the database. So what if that agent, the worst case, it's a fraudulent agent or an agent that has been hijacked, that transaction is going to end up in a chargeback. So as a merchant, you don't want to honor that transaction.
Yeah, funny enough, I was speaking to someone about that yesterday at the conference, and they were saying, if we get to that point where there's that issue where there is a fraudulent purchase and the consumer says, well, I didn't make that decision, my agent did it, so who's now going to get responsible?
Absolutely, 100%. Is it the merchant eating the loss? Is it the human? This is a very valid question, and that's why I think that merchants are going to want to validate or certify that the agent that's acting on behalf of Russell has actually been empowered by you to act on your behalf. And it's not a black or white thing as well. It's like, I give my agent the authority to buy these types of goods in this range of values. I can even maybe say what types of MCCs or merchant types I want the monies to be spent at. And that becomes the scope of the authority. It's almost like a power of attorney, right? I give the agent the authority to do things on my behalf in a certain framework. So it's useful for the merchant to know if that agent is acting within the framework that it's been authorized. So I foresee that some companies like the schemes or some large PSPs may want to offer these certification or maybe even insurance.
So do you think consumers are ready then to give up that control, or do you think they might be a bit hesitant based on some of the things we've just been saying there?
So first of all, I think there is a scenario where you do not give the control. The example that we were talking about you picking up your Portugal vacation, the curating is being done by the agent, but the ultimate decision you're making. You're saying, I want that hotel, book me this restaurant, book me the golf course for that day. So ultimately, there is valuable info, curation, recommendations. You're making the final call. So in that scenario, it's time savings, it's good advice. Same as a very knowledgeable travel agent that knows Portugal inside out would give great recommendations and very valuable for you as a consumer. Now, in the case of an end-to-end, full delegation, there is value potentially, but that's why both from a consumer and a merchant perspective, there has to be the right security framework. But I think that the potential is there. I mean, we carried out about a month ago some very detailed research as part of the Ebanx Beyond Borders 2026 report. And we found out, for example, according to McKinsey, already 10% of transactions are using AI in some way today for e-commerce. In fact, 20% of consumers feel very comfortable with the idea of using an AI to help. Maybe not fully automated, but to use an AI agent to curate the info and make recommendations and do some of the groundwork ahead of an e-commerce purchase. And Deloitte expects that by 2030, 30% of transactions in e-commerce will be fully AI helped or enabled.
Yeah. So what do you think an agent-ready checkout will look like then?
Is it a checkout? Because the agent is interacting directly with the database, right? Yeah. It's querying and saying, what's your inventory? What's your prices? Shipping, costs, delays, taxes, etc. Collecting all the info directly from the database. So it's really machine to machine. There is no UX per se. There is no checkout per se. And it's going to alter things like upsell or bundling. Because if I give my agent the authority to buy the pair of Adidas that we talked about, or Nikes, my agent hasn't been told to buy pairing socks. So because when a human goes to the site and say, hey, people that bought this pair of shoes bought these socks or bought this related product, right? A human, there is emotion, there is impulse buying. Yeah. The agent there's no emotions, right? The agent says, hey, I was told to buy this pair of Nikes or Adidas. I wasn't told to buy socks or some. What if someone says, hey, if you buy that, we give you 50% off on something else, like bundling and stuff. I think it's going to alter a little bit this whole idea of upsell and bundling.
Yeah. And a lot of the conversations around agentic commerce. They kind of focus around US, Europe. From your vantage point at Ebanx, what about emerging markets? Do you think there's an advantage there? And thinking about, how digital native and API first many of those ecosystems are, could those regions potentially leapfrog, the more established markets and become early adopters of agentic commerce?
They could. That's a great question. What we've seen of late is that emerging markets have embraced innovation. Take the example of Brazil, where PIX was introduced 5 years ago or 6 years ago, and it's already used by 95% of adults. But more importantly, it solved a real problem, because today in Brazil there is 60 million people that they don't have a credit card. So if you want to sell to those 6 million, you better accept PIX. And the level of adoption of technology, because it solved the problem. It's brought about financial inclusion and made it easier. So people are kind of embracing of innovation, and I do believe that emerging markets are probably going to be early adopters. But again, I don't see it as an all or nothing, that it has to be fully automated, fully delegated. There's all kinds of in-between scenarios that add a lot of value, but that do not entail necessarily relinquishing. I think the holy grail, or the best of both worlds, is if you can automate but preserve control. So the example is a bit of a different thing, but the example I often give to illustrate the concept is, so I have a place in Florida, and obviously I have to pay every month, electricity, right? I get an electricity bill. Now imagine if I can tell my bank, look, when the bill comes in from the utility, if it's between $80 and $120, paid in a fully automated way, I don't need to see it, because it's in the right range. Now, if it's below 80 or if it's over 120, send it to me. Why is that? Because there could be an anomaly. It could be that my AC broke, and if it's $40, that's not normal. I'm going to call my AC guy and ask him to go and check that everything is working. If it's $200, or maybe someone left all the lights on. So it's maybe 3 or 4% of the instances that are going to come to me. The other 96 will be fully automated. So that's an example of the best of both worlds. Automate 96% of the transactions because they're within a range that's expected. Anything below or over comes to me, because a human needs to double check that, it's something is. I think you could do the same type of philosophy of automating what's easily automatable with low risk, and anything that's an outlier, have a human check.
Yeah. Perfect. Listen, I feel we've kind of overrun a little bit, but it's always good to get your expertise on the show. We'll have to catch up at the next conference. But for now, Daniel Kornitzer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
So welcome back to the podcast to Sandra Mianda, the founder and CEO of Paypr.work. Sandra, good to see you again.
Indeed. Only the third time.
Absolutely, yeah. We did all this on Ecommpay's booth last year. We're back here, so thank you again for joining us.
Pleasure, thank you.
The key topic that we're kind of focusing on is agentic commerce today. Among the merchants and fintechs that you advise, how far along the journey do you think they are with that? Are you seeing kind of real experimentation? Are they sort of building their roadmaps? Is it kind of more cautious approach?
I think there are actually two groups, and that's probably what happens all the time when you see innovations, erupting. You've got the early adopters, so the ones that are fairly keen to try and jump on the wagon. Sometimes it's probably led with the FOMO, right? We've seen metaverse, elements of breakthrough innovation gaining that momentum. And then you've got the ones that are cautious, but they're still observing. The bottom line, specifically when it comes to agentic commerce, I think it is not being ignored. So I'm seeing a lot more interest and certainly trying to figure it out, because there's many different layers. I mean, we say agentic commerce, but what does that really mean? And what does that take to truly start seeing what that brings from the shopping perspective, but also how merchants adapt their infrastructure, etc. So I think it's definitely driving the interest with some a bit more forward in terms of taking part in use cases, conversation, standards, protocols. There's so many different layers, and others not ignoring it, but more from the sideline, taking notice until they reach a level of readiness, maturity, or whatever to start jumping on this.
Okay. What do you think an agent-ready checkout realistically requires, and also what capabilities are really critical?
So, if I wear the hat of a merchant, because effectively that technology will require that merchants have got products, services that are defined in a way that it gets picked up by the way this agent essentially interprets the intent to then drive specific purchases to specific merchants. So if I'm looking at this from a merchant perspective, it does require that they actually adapt the way they would typically deal with the visibility of their catalog, right? An AI is not a human person in the way that they will assess and decide and dictate what purchase will be made, right? So that emotive element is taken out, right? So what that means is that the product, in the way it's designed, needs to have or adapt to the protocols and the framework that gives the visibility to the product to be picked up by the intent of the AI. So that's on the merchant side. But then I think from the ecosystem of the PSPs, the gateways that are essentially enabling that as technology and solutions that is available through checkout, there is layers that I think really needs to be taken here. And for me, I'm thinking first you need a framework, because we have an industry that's been relying on card rails. So there is a framework. There is trust component established that then dictates that people nowadays are comfortable paying with a card. But now interacting with this software piece, because that's effectively what is behind an AI, does certainly require how does the trust get then reflected there? How does the alternative scenarios, so say that product is not available, what is the alternative, what is the different parameters that will dictate how long the AI needs to keep looking and searching for that. So I think from a technology standpoint, there's the framework, there's protocols, there's standards, because it can't be everybody building it their own way, right? So there's a lot still to figure out before we start seeing, real deep, real solid use case. I think there's a lot of experimentation, but it's not yet at the level of being deployed as a standard solutions that get adopted and drive mass.
Yeah. Do you think merchants will gain more by being an early adopter in the space, or is it better to be a kind of fast follower?
What I would say is the earlier adopters get an opportunity to also shape where and how those frameworks are designed, because there is no ground. This is being built practically from a lot of a discovery perspective, right? So I think the big merchants that identified that there is a fundamental value in the way that can shift how they operate today, 100%, they have an opportunity to start shaping by being almost the blueprint of how an agentic commerce transaction would reflect in the vertical that they're operating in. The one thing I will tell you is that it's definitely one that cannot be ignored. And I'm always comparing that to other technologies whereby, 2 years or whatever, 3 years ago, we were just on the AI generative. Yeah, everybody's now using ChatGPT for any sort of question. In that space of 2 years, we are already here. So first and foremost, that cannot be ignored. Second, irrespective of the level of maturity that any merchants are, they have, at the very least, to start getting closer to the conversation, to understand, to listen in, even purely from an observant perspective, because it goes so quick and so fast that by the time this might become a real opportunity, the uplift to then get them on that boat would be potentially quite substantial.
Yeah. Well, let's pick up on that. When do you think the time will be? How far are we away from scaling beyond those, pilot stages? And what's going to be the trigger point for it to go live?
I don't want to be hold on hook here for anything that I say. What I'd say is, I think this year, we are hopefully, and that's what I'm expecting, moving from the inception of, this is emerging as a technology. We're starting to see the interest in some of the FOMO to actually starting seeing real use case. So that's what I'm expecting the next few months leading, to 2027 next year.
Yeah, I know.
I'm like,
Crazy.
I'm expecting to start seeing more adoption from not just merchant, but different parties from the ecosystem to start playing a part in how things are shaped up, so that we can start having an operation and a practical, real perspective of what is the game-changing aspect of agentic commerce, agentic AI. But what I'm probably going to say is that typically when you see big trends, big innovation, it can take 5-10 years. 5 you'd be very lucky. It's probably a good cycle of 10 years when you see real innovation starting to break through to the level that it starts becoming probably a mainstream adoption.
Yeah.
Even things like Apple Pay, as simple as the biometric technology. As much as the technology was absolutely, without a doubt, great breakthrough innovation, it took time for real adoption. It took really time for not just adoption from the merchant side, but also from the customers. And also, it was very much ring-fenced within an ecosystem that was an Apple phone, right? So there's different layers to that. And I think it's the same thing here. Once we strip to and we really understand the framework, the protocols, the catalogs as well, that the merchants need to start designing to be picked up in that, then we will have a realistic time scale. So if I was saying that 10 years is the average of what we're seeing, I would almost put my bet that with agentic commerce, we're probably going to see a much quicker than the traditional way it takes, for innovation to start breaking through. So I'm not giving you a number, but I can tell you that I think we are onto something that is really fundamentally breaking every model.
Yeah. But that's getting the infrastructure ready. But what about, do you think the customers are ready for it? Or are they going to be hesitant to give up that control?
I probably sense more resistance from the end users. I think very much right now the conversation is dominating within us, right? The industry, the people that design, shape, build product around that. The consumer needs to be sold on to, when I'm saying that is, there's of course different categories, right? They are the ones that happily, today see the value of, getting AI for practically everything in their life. But fundamentally what I'm saying is like, depending on the purchase that you're making, buying a ticket and a pair of sneakers is a very different context, right? So that's going to really dictate as well the areas where potentially we're going to see a much quicker adoption from the consumer, the price point, I think, the type of product that we're talking about, and also if elements like loyalty, I've got a big play in that, the fraud aspect, so how quickly, if there's any problem, I get refunded, all of that, right? So I think that fundamentally dictates the type of purchases that consumer will be probably fairly happy to start jumping on and utilizing these sorts of protocols of checkout options. But I see probably a bit more resistance because it's we're talking all of a sudden that decisions potentially for some important purchases get defined by a software that needs to understand your intent and have all the context of all of the exception scenarios to execute. So fundamentally, the principle of that is great, but how many consumers today are ready to use that almost like a concierge? Buy me that pair of shoes, get me the ticket for the stadium, blah, 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 get me a flight from New York. It's great conceptually, but then are there really? I'm not. I think it's probably skeptical, a little bit a step back.
Sure. Okay, and then so finally, what about the role of the payment service providers? What should they realistically play in the adoption of agentic commerce?
We're going to need almost, so if I'm thinking today, the way commerce has been accelerated from a digital function, the last 5 years, I've had a real leapfrogging, supported or aided by, unfortunately, the pandemic. So I think the PSP going to need some sort of breakthrough that brings it so much at the forefront of the conversation, of the usage, that it's not second thought, but it's embedded somehow, so naturally in the way people shop, in the way people interact. Because payment, we talk about payment, but for the consumer, the end users, it's just 1 second of something. They don't really know or care about all of that. So the technology behind need to have that instantaneity component while still catering for the compliance, the authorization, all the framework around that also need to sit in the different step of that transaction. And yet, we're still expecting that, every part of the ecosystem, the way it's being built, is going to connect. It's going to be interoperable. It's going to transfer to different contexts, to different what's the word? To different frameworks, to different sectors. All of those nuances are really important. So I think the PSP have got one of the biggest tasks, along with the regulations that are, when I say regulations, I'm not talking formally regulation, but I'm talking about the framework, the foundation aspect, the protocols, the standards that then essentially enable whatever gets built over that. They are definitely part of the ecosystem that got a big task ahead in the discoverability to getting us as an industry on the next step. Makes sense?
Absolutely. Always good to get your expertise on the podcast. Sandra, Mianda, great to see you again. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure. And I think we can probably realistically expect a number 4, right?
Absolutely. So I'm now joined by Marco Conte, who is founder of Conversational, which is an Ixopay company, and now is the VP for Product, AI, Data and Insights at Ixopay. So Marco, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Now listen, this is the first time we've had Ixopay on the podcast, so why don't we start by you just introducing the business to us?
Yeah, so I would define Ixopay as a payments infrastructure company that provides orchestration and tokenization services to global enterprise merchants, looking at simplify the complexity of payments. And on top of that, there are compliance services, there are data intelligence services with Conversational. So this is in a nutshell.
Brilliant. Now, you were on a session this morning about agentic commerce, which actually ties in nicely because it's the key kind of topic that we're talking about here on Ecommpay's booth. So, yeah, how did that session go this morning? What were the highlights?
I think it was a really exciting session. So the people on the panel we had, representing companies like Visa from a scheme perspective, OpenAI from the actual AI infrastructure, and then Stripe and Checkouts and us. I think it was like stellar, right? The people that can actually discuss the topic from different perspectives and point of views. And we see that we agree that this is going to be massive, it's going to be disruptive. We kind of disagree on let's say the practicalities or details, but nobody disagrees on the impact that's going to have in the industry.
Well, let's pick up on that. In terms of the merchants that you're working with, where do you think they are in their agentic commerce journey at the moment then?
I think that right now it's obviously early days. So it's always a question of businesses in general, who is an early or first mover versus companies that prefer to wait a little bit. So the majority of companies are in, let's say, attention mode or information mode, trying to understand what's happening, but not really moving and rolling. There are a few companies, specific verticals, piloting the solution and working with us on brainstorming, on having some testing and a few different things. But it's really early days.
Yeah.
So
where do you think those first movers will be? What sector?
I think there is a lot of potential in industry like travel, for example. Where users have more complex journeys, right? I was making an example during the panel discussion today that I really love to plan my trips in a much more convenient way, and LLMs are not there yet. So that will be a use case where things can be quite fast. It's a question of when people might change their habits. For example, I always make the example of people buying while driving, right? And who's gonna finalize the transaction? An agent, booking a restaurant, paying for the restaurants, or I don't know, buying some soap for your house, or things that you are used to buy. So those might be use cases or industries where things might come first.
Do you think those first movers though are going to win, or is it better to sit, wait, be a fast follower?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? Because it's always a bit of it's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
If you move first, you encounter problems first.
Yeah.
But then you have experience as well.
Yeah.
But if you move second, then you will have more ready-to-use solutions.
Yeah.
But some of your competitors might already be there, so they might have more understanding. I think what is important now is at least to be there as first, ready to move, and then you are ready to just switch something on. You don't need to bring right now volumes or infrastructure live because it's very early days. Customers are not even used to use what is available there. but at least not being like a third mover or really not even knowing what's happening right now. That should be the goal.
And you touched on problems. I mean, in terms of like, is there consideration for those failure modes that might come? What do you think might happen there? Things like fraud or,
we know that, we definitely know that we need to get ready to change some stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So we can't base our models or our strategies in payments, even payment operations, it can be like anything else, to how we do things today. So we need to get used to see like new behaviors, distinguishing, for example, bots from agents. Those are two different things. Agents behaving as a bots that might simply try different things on the website, trying everything, versus an agent that can go straight to the point.
Yeah.
So things are going to change. The way that liability shift is going to be, understood, or like chargebacks are going to be managed. There's a lot of things. There are still a lot of open questions, obviously, because like we need to be, pragmatic. Like the schemes are drafting new protocols, new procedures, and there are still some open points. But I'm quite confident that all of this will be covered eventually. Yeah.
Do you think we know what an agent-ready checkout might look like yet then?
I would say more conversational.
Okay.
So right now, in some cases, you might have a lot of clicks, add your shipping address, add this information, that information, and with an agent, it will be like, writing a few things, and the agent asking you, hey, do you want to ship it to the same address that you had last time? Like more in this style, or should I use the Visa cards or the MasterCard card with last 4 digits 1, 2, 3, 4? So it's gonna be much faster. Like people just go in there and say yes or no, and for sure, a shorter experience.
Yeah.
Now there is going to be a lot of verification to make sure that what you were asking to the agent to buy actually, was the right thing.
Do you think the consumers are ready for it?
Some, yes.
Yeah. Does it make a difference what industry, what sector that might be in?
Probably yes. But, we need to consider that the world is very big, right? And there are like parts of the world where people are more open to technology, and as well, depending on which type of person you are. So I'm sure there are people out there that would love to have this, maybe more techie than the average. But once convenience will be ensured, and things will be simple, I think that any shopper will prefer something faster, easier, quicker, with more information available. So I think it is time. But it's gonna be like everything. Early days, few adapters, and then at a certain point, we will see a boom, and if things will skyrocket.
And final one for you, in terms of like the role that PSPs should play within this space, what's your thoughts on that?
So PSPs, payment service providers, they need to ensure the infrastructure in payments is working, right? So this is on top of payments as usual, as I like to call it. Processing and authorization, capturing, settling. This is what payment service providers or gateways are supposed to do, offering wallets, payment methods. So now they're going to have a different entry channel. So it's not going to be anymore an hosted payment page or a payment card object. It's going to be a conversational checkout, or an agent-to-agent communication built somewhere else, maybe on the website of the merchant, maybe on the iSearches, maybe on new players, who knows, right? So the payment service providers, they need to ensure that all of this can be processed. With the proliferation of protocols, they need to ensure that protocols are supported. They need to ensure that trust is in place with ident verification and validation, agent mandates, data sharing, and similar. So that's the role. Now, what happens when, as a merchant, you have so many different payment service provider connections, which is very common, right? The average is like 4 to 5 in the payments industry. Do you want to support protocols one by one, or do you want to have an abstraction layer, something before that is either built by you or used in the industry with some dedicated providers? So that's where I see, for example, the orchestration role, which can help with this abstraction layer on top of that, instead of building. But that's, as always, like a build versus buy decision. Some companies prefer to build, some prefer to buy, but at least there's going to be solutions out there.
Yeah. Great to get Ixopay on the podcast at last. Marco, Conte, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
So it's actually a welcome back to the podcast to Kestas Saulis, Head of Payments at Nord Security. Kestas, thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, hi Russell. It's great to be back.
Yeah, we actually spoke on this very booth here at MPE last year. So I thought what we could do is pick up the conversation where we left off. I asked you then about what innovations in payment technology and trends you were keeping an eye on. You said at the time AI, both internally at Nord and related to the payment service providers that you work with. What's changed in the last 12 months since then?
So everything in terms of AI just rapidly expedited and exceeded my forecasts like this. And things moving very fast. It's technology is getting real, and let's say with the let's call it recent developments, like which happened a few months ago, like first merchants roll out with OpenAI. It's like, it's quite impressive, and the things that you think that will happen, let's say, in a year or two, and when it happens in a half year, it's like super crazy.
Is that one of the biggest challenges that you face, is keeping up with the pace of change and development?
Yes, that's the actual challenge, and you never know what might come next and when exactly.
Yeah. The area of AI that we're focusing on this year here at MPE, on this on Ecommpay's booth today is Agentic commerce. It would be great to understand exactly where Nord is in that kind of agentic journey. Are you experimenting? Are you forming early roadmaps, or is it still a kind of let's wait and see what's happening?
Yeah, so we actively participate in the field, despite the fact that current agentic commerce is more structured for retail companies. And since Nord Security is a subscription business in a digital goods vertical, so our time is still to come in some near future.
Okay.
But we have high hopes.
So on that though, I mean, do you think Agentic will reward those first movers in the space, or will they ultimately win if that's the case?
Tricky question. I would say that early adopters will be able to learn from their mistakes and adapt quickly. And this way creating some advantage for them to move forward. While fast adopters, of course, they will cover the easier path, but still, there will be a gap.
Yeah. Could you foresee what those mistakes might be, or what challenges they may come across?
So the main challenges would be, let's say, risk and compliance, for example.
Yeah.
And there's the brand reputation can be harmed way easier in the current state than with, let's say, old school flow. And once this would be overcome, then I think it would be way easier to handle.
Okay. And what about, I understand in terms of the space you're in, do you expect there is appetite from consumers or even those working on behalf of their businesses for agentic-driven purchases, to evolve? Do you think they'll embrace the use of agents, or will there be a kind of, hesitation around giving up the control?
Overall, I think that it should be a way bigger education, because the consumer education provided. Otherwise, the payments ecosystem participants are developing the fancy thing for themselves. And when it comes to user habits, I think it will be somewhat split, like not 50-50, but to some extent. Because when it comes, let's say, to the, regular purchases, detergents or other stuff in the household, or let's say you want the bot to buy a ticket for the event while they're still not in access, right? So that would be an easy thing to set. However, when it comes to personal things, like things people care about, or clothing, I think that consumers will tend to click a pay button by themselves still.
And what about when it comes to the payment service providers? What role do you think they're playing in this ecosystem?
Well, they're playing quite a huge role. So actually they are one of the main drivers all agentic commerce. So they would need to build a safety net for the fraud management, let's say, and to be able to say to the merchant clearly who's is real agent bot and who is the scammer. And this is quite an advantage still to be dealt with.
Yeah. Final one for you. We're kind of a day and a half into the show. What's the kind of key takeaway for you from MPE this year?
Agentic, obviously.
Can't get away from it.
It's like a rolling snowball from the mountain, so it's getting bigger and bigger. The next would be, I think, orchestration, because it's closely binded with same agentic commerce, and the way that we're gonna route transactions in the future will obviously change. So that's what we need to be prepared for too.
Really appreciate you joining us for a second year running. Kestas, Saulis, thank you for joining the podcast.
Thank you for inviting us. Pleasure as always.
So I'm now joined by Vishal, Shukla, the lead product manager at Tipico. Shall we start with a quick intro to Tipico and your role there?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. And it's great to be at MPE again. Tipico is one of Europe's leading sports betting and entertainment brands with a strong footprint in a regulated market like Germany. And our focus has always been on secure, compliant, and frictionless user experiences, especially around payments, where the trust is built. And I lead the product team at Tipico, and we ensure that our customers can deposit, withdraw, and transfer or manage their funds seamlessly, also navigating through a stringent regulatory landscape. So we sit at the intersection of payments, risk, user experience, and compliance, which is like not a boring.
Okay, now you're on stage tomorrow here at MPE in a session about frictionless checkouts. You're specifically focusing on how Europe's VOP framework unlocks faster, safer payments. What can the audience expect to hear from you in that talk?
Sure. So my session will walk through how we are seeing the shift from AIA's open banking solution to VOP for account ownership, and if you see historically, and especially the gambling merchants, they used AIS-based solution because there wasn't anything available at that moment. Purpose built for ownership checks. But now, the regulation evolved in the way, and now we have a purpose-built solution which does not require any redirects, no SCA, no permission for sharing extra data, and trust me that the players at the time of withdrawal, they don't like it, right? They don't, they don't like to log into an banking app at the time of doing withdrawal. So this is a game changer for an industry like ours.
And given the highly regulated environment that your industry is in, how does regulation reshape payment architecture?
Regulation is not a constraint for our industry. It's a design input.
Okay.
Right. And if we see how regulation has evolved, your systems has to be modular. And this is definitely an input to our architecture. Now, if we see the shift is going from purpose-built APIs, because you don't have to get all of the data. You are limited with getting the data from your sources, right? Or let's say we have a strong transaction monitoring for AML requirements, and then if we go, countries like Germany have strong regulations where deposits and withdrawals can only be done to the accounts of the players, right, that they own. So all of this is forcing the gambling merchants and the people and the merchants or operators around this industry to have compliance as an important component in their architectural design.
Right. One of the areas that we're focusing on the interviews today is agentic commerce. I was wondering whether or not you can comment, obviously from an industry perspective, on how actively it's being used, and also what an agent-ready checkout might actually look like, in practice.
Agentic commerce is at very early stage, but we have seen an uptick for it in adjacent sectors like retail, travel, and subscription management. But for gambling, it is slower, and it will be slower for some time, because there is psychology of users. They want to remain in control of what they are doing in the way placing the bets or deciding on withdrawals, right? And they don't want to give this control to agents. So yes, this is where the things will evolve, and this is a little bit where they would be hesitant, but coming to the agent ready checkout, right? So this agent ready checkout serves two individuals, or like say two things. One is the humans, right? And the second thing is the agents who are working or serving or acting on behalf of the humans. So the checkout or agent ready checkout has to be in the way defined properly with the transactional flows, authorization and authentication frameworks. There has to be a monitoring systems or monitoring features around what agents are doing, right? With the things that they are doing with the human information. And then the last but not the least is you definitely have to make them do only the things that the user wants, right? Not additional on top of it.
Yeah.
So all of this will I think evolve in some time, but this is from my perspective, I think it looks like an agent-ready checkout experience.
Okay, and final one for you. And given you've actually worked at a payment service provider yourself, so I was keen to understand what you think. The role of PSPs should be in this space. Should they be, actively guiding the merchants on deploying agentic AI? So that could be anything from setting guardrails and standards, providing the tooling, around safety. Or is their role mainly to remain kind of neutral infrastructure and maybe let the market, evolve on its own over time?
I think PSP has to play a massive role in this one, because if you leave it to the merchants to decide on building agent-ready checkout experience, it will be a nightmare. And PSPs are the ones who also defined or who also worked on standardization of 3D secure and tokenization and SCA frameworks, right? So they have already done it historically in the way, and I think they are better positioned here to do it in the same way.
Good luck with your session tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you, thanks a lot. And I really like coming back to MPE. MPE is one of the platforms that brings the forward-thinking professionals in the payments together. And I'm looking forward for VOP and frictionless payments and agentic commerce, how it will unfold in coming years.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
That's okay. Vishal, Shukla, thank you so much for joining us. Well, that's it for this episode from MPE Berlin. Thanks once again to all my guests who took the time to chat to me today, and of course to Ecommpay for hosting us on their booth. If you've enjoyed the show, please do give us a positive rating and review on your podcast app of choice. And of course, if you want to get in touch with us, you can do that via the website at csuitepodcast.com, or you can find me, Russell Goldsmith, on LinkedIn. But for now, thanks for listening and goodbye.